Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite topics of all time, solo travel. This video is all about the top destinations that I think are perfect for traveling alone, especially as a woman, and especially if it's your first time. I've been fortunate to travel to nearly 30 countries, mostly by myself. There are tons of countries that are great for solo travelers for a bunch of different reasons. But I've narrowed it down here to my top 5 recommendations, and I'll talk all about why each one is a great option for your solo female trip. I'm Sara Stilleke. I'm a scientist, and my channel is all about how to level up to become more productive and successful, and how to become a citizen of the world. So if that's something you're looking for, please subscribe to my channel because I release new videos every Tuesday. Number 5 is Thailand. This is the only Asian country on my list. And I just think that Thailand is such a great place to travel solo, especially if it's one of your first trips. Thailand is known for its safety and the friendliness of its people. It has an extremely rich culture and history, and there are a ton of different types of activities. There's temples and cultural sites and different spiritual activities to take part in. There are islands that you can visit with amazing beaches. There's also ecotourism, which is one of my personal favorites. One of my favorite parts of my trip to Thailand was visiting the Phuket Elephant Sanctuary on the island of Phuket, where they rescued some beautiful elephants from a tough life in the logging and tourism industries and gave them a chill retirement. You can't pet the elephants, but you can feed them some fruit and watch them in their natural habitats while learning all about elephants and ethical, sustainable tourism. Another activity that I recommend is a boat tour of the Phang Nga Bay, famous for the so-called James Bond Island. The boat tour takes you to a few different islands with stops to hang out on the beach, see some wild monkeys, and even visit Koh Phangan, an entire man-made floating island that is home to a whole village of about 1,600 people. There are a couple of reasons why I think Thailand is a great destination for solo travel. First, the country has been a top tourist destination for many years, which means that they have an extremely well-developed tourism infrastructure. This means you'll have plenty of choices for accommodations, from budget hostels to luxury resorts. English is pretty widely spoken, it's generally very safe, and most tours and activities are pretty well organized. One piece of advice that I do have is to utilize public transportation or arrange for rides. I made the mistake of renting a car here. 0 out of 10, do not recommend. I was not used to driving a manual transmission car, and I drove on the opposite side of the road, and the traffic was pretty crazy. It would have been much better to arrange for transportation so I could relax and enjoy looking out the window. Thailand was also super affordable, which is great for travelers on a budget. I was able to get several excellent massages while I was there, stay in a super nice hotel, and eat out at delicious restaurants for nearly every meal. And my credit card bill didn't make me want to cry at the end. Number 4 on my list, Sweden. Stockholm, Sweden was the first Nordic country I've ever visited, and I'll never forget my first impressions when I arrived. When I got to the airport, there was plenty of clear signage directing me to find the train to the city. There were friendly transit employees all at the train station who all spoke excellent English and who helped me purchase my ticket and let me know which stop would be the best for my hotel. Once I got off the train, I walked just about 10 minutes to my hotel, and I noticed one single piece of trash on the ground. A random guy spotted it, walked over to pick it up and drop it in the trash can, and continued on his way. I was blown away by this small act of care, especially living in Southern California. But apparently this is just part of the culture in Sweden, because I saw this happen several other times. The bicycle infrastructure and public transportation was amazing. And because there's so much water, boating is also a common form of transportation for many people. Sweden is also known as one of the safest countries in the world. And when I visited during the month of May, I was surprised how safe I felt walking around, even after 10 p.m., and it helps that the sun was still up. Sweden is well known as a great destination for solo female travelers for a couple of reasons. First, it's consistently ranked as one of the safest countries in the world, and the majority of Swedes I encountered spoke English completely fluently. I also found it useful that most of the signs and menus around Stockholm were written in both English and Swedish, which made it super easy to get around. I didn't have enough time during my trip to visit all the areas outside of Stockholm that I wanted, but I can say that there was tons to do just walking around the city. I did one of those super touristy educational boat tours, which ended up being a highlight of my trip. The audio guide was really informative, and the scenery was just gorgeous. But my favorite part of the tour was going through one of the many tiny locks, alongside people in kayaks and other tiny boats, to get to another lake with a higher water level. I stopped by 2 museums, the famous Vasa Museum, as well as the Nobel Prize Museum. When I was there at the Nobel Prize Museum, the main exhibit was about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I found it super interesting to learn about this era of American history from an international perspective. Other than that, I found the Nordic architecture to just be super cool, and I spent tons of hours just wandering around, getting lost, and taking in the sights. Next up, number 3 is Canada. It is true that Canadians are super friendly. I was so happy to find that this stereotype is absolutely correct. Canada is a huge country, so depending on what you're looking for, there are so many different options for things to do and so much to see. This is really a great country to visit for solo travelers, especially if it's your first time traveling abroad. It's really safe, and you'll find that everyone speaks English. So if you're nervous about dealing with a language barrier during your travels, Canada is a great option. There are actually 2 national languages in Canada, English and French. So if you're visiting the Quebec area, you're going to hear more French for sure, but everyone still speaks plenty of English, so you won't need to worry. Canada has lots of modern infrastructure, including reliable public transit in the cities and well-maintained roads, if you should decide to rent a car and explore more in the wilderness. It's also a popular tourist destination, so you won't have any trouble finding hotels, hostels, and group tours, whatever you're looking for. One thing that I really enjoyed the last time I visited Canada, specifically in Vancouver, was the huge variety of different nature activities that were so close to the city. Like literally, in a single day, I took a 20-minute bus ride to see the famous Capilano Suspension Bridge in one of the world's rare temperate rainforests. Then I rented a bike to explore the trees, lakes, and totem poles in the Stanley Park, and then I relaxed in the sand at the beach. Like, where else can you do all of that in the same day? My number 2 recommendation for solo female travel destinations is France. I love France. I've visited about 6 times now, both to the major cities as well as the smaller towns. There is something in France for everyone, depending on what you're looking for. In Paris, of course, you'll find world-class museums and iconic landmarks like the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe, and the Palace of Versailles. What I would recommend for first-timers, though, is to spend some time in Paris, but also venture to some other areas. France is home to one of the best high-speed train systems in the world, the TGV, so you can get from Paris to other areas really quickly and affordably. If you want to see some gorgeous vineyards and sip world-class wine while spending the night in a chateau, you should head to the south of France, where you can pick from tons of different options depending on your taste in wine. I've done this in a couple of different regions, with my favorites being Narbonne and Châteauneuf-du-Pape, both in the south of France. If you want to lay on the beach while admiring the Mediterranean Sea, there are tons of places to do that as well. And if you're in the mood to splurge and gamble, or just want to take in the fanciest place you've ever seen, you can head over to Monaco. It's technically its own different country, nestled within France and bordering Italy, but is definitely worth it just to take in the opulence and the beautiful views. The reason I think France is so great for solo travelers is because it's already such a big tourist destination. This means that the locals are used to tourists, and you'll have no problems finding lodging and other amenities, and there's tons of things to do no matter what you're interested in. One thing to be aware of is that most people in Paris, Marseille, Toulouse, and other cities and touristy areas will speak pretty good English, but as you get to smaller, more remote areas, you may find the English there to be a bit more limited, so it's a good idea to brush up on a few common French phrases before you go. Another thing is that if you're planning on driving in France, the roads and signage are very high quality, and outside of Paris, it's pretty easy to get around with a car. Coming from California, though, I definitely was not prepared for the amount of roundabouts in France. The French are pro roundabout users, and these are way more common than streetlights at intersections. So if you're planning on driving, definitely brush up on the rules and best practices for roundabouts and pack your confidence. And finally, my number 1 destination recommendation for solo female travelers is Panama. I never would have expected Panama to be so great for solo travel, let alone my number 1 recommendation. But I spent some time there earlier this year, and I was blown away by how awesome this country is. The rainforest is personally my favorite type of nature. Some people like beaches, tropical islands, mountains, lakes, or the countryside, but my favorite has always been the rainforest. The good news, though, in addition to the rainforest, Panama also has beaches, tropical islands, mountains, lakes, and the countryside. It's a super tiny country, so you can easily travel between ecosystems, depending on what type of activities you're in the mood for. The capital city, Panama City, is also incredibly beautiful, safe, and metropolitan. If you've ever seen this cool tower in a picture, it can be found in Panama. Panama City also has a nice old town with well-maintained colonial architecture, as well as some even older ruins, all within the city limits. The country is also home to the famous Panama Canal. It's a pretty expensive tour, and you'll need to book it pretty far in advance, but I did book one of the tourist boats that goes through the Panama Canal, and it was pretty fun to actually be in the locks with the giant cargo ships rising up and down with the water levels. In addition to having tons of different things to do and awesome rainforests, there are a few other reasons why I think Panama is great for solo female travelers. It's one of the safest countries in Central America, and I personally never felt unsafe. The official currency of Panama is the US dollar, which was also very convenient, and it was also very affordable. As an example, I stayed in a beautiful 5-star hotel in the city center for like $120 a night. A 15-minute Uber ride around town was like $3, and a nice meal at a restaurant, cocktails included, was under $20. Most people spoke at least some English, so while it's definitely helpful to speak a little Spanish if you can definitely get around without it. Finally, as I mentioned before, Panama is super tiny, so you'll be able to see and do lots of different things without needing to hop on a plane or drive too far. And those are my top 5 destinations for solo travel, especially if it's your first time. I'm incredibly passionate about solo travel. It's been such a life-changing and growing experience for me, and I truly hope this video has helped inspire you to take that first step if you're considering a solo trip. If you enjoyed this video, you might also enjoy this 4-part series I made about exactly how to plan your solo trip, which you can check out here. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.